Hey everybody, this is Cody, Liz, and Chino with our presentation on pseudocode. Throughout the course of this presentation, we're going to talk a little bit about what pseudocode is, some of the advantages that it presents, as well as some of the disadvantages, and we'll end with a recommendation of where and when pseudocode should be used and how it can be used in our project. So here's Liz with what pseudocode is.
Pseudocode is basically a language that it's not a programming language. It is a readable language, something that that anybody would be able to understand. This would be a detailed list of the steps in the design of the program. There is no set syntax for pseudocode, so there are many different variations of how it is written. And but the important thing is that it is a detailed and only has one statement per line. Some examples of pseudocode that I saw were that some of them actually did, like if it was a loop, they would write the for or the while or the if and write the pseudocode similar to that. Some things that I read said, no, it's supposed to be more readable, have different keywords like display or accept. So I kind of did a cross between them and an example so that people could see the technique of pseudocode. I also input the comment lines because I think it was suggested by some that it could be the comments before each piece of code is written to keep things organized when writing the code, and so that anybody looking at the code later knows exactly what that code underneath those comments are. So an example for our ESP registration would be registration form would be an email, and if the email format is correct, then incorrect, then display an error message. If it's correct, then accept the email, and on through all the steps of the input, and then display the message if registration is successful. And it could also be the functions, the queries that are going to input this information into the database. And this would be an example of what pseudocode. It's readable code, and it's just one potential way that pseudocode can be written.
So I'm going to go over some of the advantages of pseudocode. First off, pseudocode can be easily written in any text editor, and it's easily created and modified. Secondly, it's also easy to read and understand, so much so that it can even be understood by non-technical personnel, and they can read it and gain some understanding of what the program is going to accomplish. Lastly, pseudocode is it's easy to convert to a programming language and helps programmers think through the logic of the code before getting into any of the nitty-gritty details. In doing so, they're able to catch errors earlier and stop defects before they become code. So this can ultimately lead to an increase in trust and a decrease in cost. Next, we'll go over some of the disadvantages of pseudocode and some of its shortcomings. First off, just as Liz mentioned earlier, there's no structure or formatting guidelines when it comes to pseudocode, which means there are a wide array of preferences and expectations between companies and individual programmers when it comes to what pseudocode should look like and how in-depth it should be. Secondly, pseudocode doesn't provide a visual representation of the code, nor does it include a full logic of the code. This can make it hard for some programmers to follow the logic and flow when compared to flowcharts or other visual representations of the code. Lastly, which is also directly related to the last point, because it doesn't represent all of the logic, it can be misleading to non-programmers and even beginning programmers about how complex the project will be and how potentially time-consuming it could be to code the project.
So why we should use pseudocode during our program design? especially during the program design, is first, one of the hardest things is to resist the temptation to start writing code. Pseudocode can definitely help us to clarify our thoughts as a team and help us design a routine properly before we can start writing any code. It's easy to modify. For example, we can add and eliminate something from our design. It can also be done in any word process, like was mentioned, which allow us as a team to participate, for example, in Google Doc. So as we start writing pseudocode, pseudocode is a linear. It needs to be written only in one statement per line. It has to be capitalized initial keywords. It needs to be indent to show hierarchy and structure. And multi-line structure, like any computer program language, it needs to be read as a computer is going to execute from the beginning to an end of each process. Should always keep the statement language independent, and always remember that we describe as logic plan to develop to a program. We are not programming anything yet. We're still designing. We're still in the design process. Here are some resources that we use for this presentation, and thank you for watching this presentation.